Yay, I think we're live. So I'm gonna just go live on some other places too, if that works. Or no. If anyone is out there and hears us in the chat to write to us so we know that you can hear us. And we're gonna wait. We're a little bit early, so we're gonna wait a little bit, but I can see us streaming on Instagram too now. So let's see, yeah, here we are. Let's see. Now we're on the clock, so I hope everyone is here. So can you hear us now, chat? I'm gonna write and see. See if we get any replies. But I think they can, and that we like. So I'm gonna start this lovely interview today, and I will start with introducing myself. I'm Annette from Fashion Design Tribe. And what I offer in my business is consulting from, and they can hear us great, from design concept through to manufacturing. So I help brands that want to start up or small brands to go from design concept, size specifications, design tech pack, and the whole production journey with sampling and all of that. I also offer business mentoring for people within the fashion industry or textile designers if you want to get more into the sales and the marketing. And that's me. And before I introduce my lovely guests, I'm just going to tell you a tiny story about why it's so important what she does. So I've been in the industry for many, many years, many more than I want to admit, so that I don't give away my age. But even though I know about the industry, I knew about the industry when I started my own brand because I'd already worked for a couple of years. And I know that patterns are important and design specifications and all of this. And I know that it takes a few samples. But I had a manufacturer I knew well. It's my first collection. I received this amazing parcel that I knew was my first samples. And I was so eager to go. And, I could feel the, plastic in the parcel, and you can open it, and you knew there was something soft and lovely in there. And lo and behold, the first sample is for fit, which is what we're going to talk about today. But they can come in any color, and I knew this, but I had also asked for black to be on the safe side because I was hoping if it was great in black, I could maybe order more. But I opened this parcel and my heart is like racing, and I was so excited, and I'm sure many of you out there felt the same. And out comes poo brown. And yeah, sometimes it's kind of hard, even with that, to see the fit. And actually, as a designer or as a startup owner and brand owner, maybe if you're more creative and you don't know that it could come in poo brown, it's hard to see the fit. And that's why I think this new technology we have today, which we're going to talk about with Christina, is so amazing. So with no further ado, I want to introduce Christina HadleyDike from Creative HadleyDike, who is a specialist in pattern making in Clo 3D and Illustrator. Hi, Christina.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. It's so exciting. And I know you a bit, so I know we're going to get such a great discussions out from today. But since our audience doesn't know you, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. So as Annette said, I am a pattern maker, and I love pattern making in 3D. I first learned 3D pattern making, on the computer pattern making in graduate school, and I was learning on Optitex. And that's kind of where that love of it kind of came into it. And as I left graduate school, I realized I couldn't quite afford that program on its own. So that's when I dove into Illustrator and eventually moved into the Clo 3D. I am a theatrical trained pattern maker. So I've made costumes for Broadway, off-Broadway, and many regional theaters all over the country. And it is definitely a little bit different than making patterns for fashion, but there's tons and tons of overlap. A lot of it comes to the finishing. In theater, we make stuff so that it is easily finished and altered on the inside, whereas in fashion, it is not as common to finish it with 2 extra inches in the center back that you can let out for the next person to wear. You want it to fit you really great.
That's amazing. I love that. I didn't know that. And secret, I always wanted to have, like, my dream job was to do like costume design. I'm not in costume design, but I know lots of people who start out actually in education around fashion want to go into that. So I'm in awe of this career. I think it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to hear more about this. So Optitex, is that also a 3D program then for all of us who are not experts?
Yes, it is. So you pattern it in 2D, and then you can put it around the avatar, very similar how you do it in Clo, and then you seam it together and you can fit it very similarly.
Okay, that's interesting. So Clo 3D is a 3D program where you can create patterns and designs to showcase your design. But since you use this a lot, what do you use it most for, Clo 3D?
So I use it most to actually kind of develop my patterns. So I have an entire range of slopers from for all the different sizes that I want to. And then when I actually am developing a pattern, I will figure out which sloper is the closest to the girl I want to start with. And then I can kind of finesse and figure out that sloper and then flat pattern it from there. And then as you flat pattern it and make it, create it, you can continue you can continue to reseam it on Clo 3D. So you could actually see it take the processes. So if you wanted to do like a dart rotation and you had it all kind of placed on the avatar, you could do the dart rotation and reseam it. And you could see how that dart rotation looks different on the avatar. So that's one of those things that's really great because especially with like fullness or style line placements, you can actually kind of change those as you go. And you can kind of be looking at that as you're patterning to really figure out what you want. When working in theaters, I sometimes will ask, like, how full do you want the skirt or how full do you want this gathering? And it's like, do you want a 1.5 to 1? Do you want a 2 to 1? Do you want a 3 to 1? And with Clo 3D, I can actually help them visualize what that looks like without actually having to get out my scissors and sewing machine. So it helped them really get right or get down to which they want faster.
It sounds super useful, and it sounds like something that would be very beneficial. So say, for example, someone quite new starting their brand, that you can actually see before you even maybe decide on your designs, maybe even whilst you're working on your collection, you can get a visual whilst you're also getting a pattern.
Yes, for sure. And what's also great with Clo 3D, you can actually fit your garment onto the avatar, and you can and it has different fit maps to see the different pressure and everything. So you're actually able to then semi-fit it. It will never fully take it away, take that place of that first mock-up fitting or anything like that. But it will help you get a lot closer and hopefully take a few of those steps of making mock-ups out.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. And I can definitely see that benefit, especially if you're feeling a little bit like, I have so many ideas, but I need to narrow them down, because as we all know, if you're starting a brand, don't start with a million different styles because it's super costly. So focus on like 4 is my usual recommendation. But like, so if you use Clo 3D and you had so many ideas, you could literally see them on and then narrow down. So I think super valuable for startups as well, because sometimes you think of these 3D programs that they're just for big companies who want to show their products to customers. So yeah, so that's super interesting. So tell us a little bit more about, like, so a sloper, is that kind of like a basic block for a pattern then?
Yeah. Okay. I find those two are very interchangeable depending on where you are in the world. The moulage is a little bit different because the moulage is kind of like that full torso and it goes past the waist. I find when I'm talking with people, when I talk slopers or basic blocks, they normally have that waist seam, whereas the moulage goes past the waist
it's
seam.
More of like a dummy or mannequin that you use when you're actually sewing. Or the block models or whatever. I don't know the American word for it. Like what you have behind you.
Yes, my little half scale
Yes.
here. I have a couple of those for sure.
Yeah.
And I love draping on them.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of the virtual version of that, if I'm understanding it correct.
Yeah, it's the flat pattern version of that.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, so but you use Clo mainly for patterns and for helping people make their patterns so that they can start with sampling and avoid the first sample. Because as I usually work from size specifications, which I send to the factory. So my first sample would be what you can create more in Clo 3D. So maybe we skip one sample, which is super great because it's sustainable, right? And it saves you time. So when you do this, like, how long does it take, and how do you go about it? What's the process?
So there's a few different answers for that, because if you're just looking to try to mock something up really quickly, you can go from basic block or sloper to pattern, depending on the complexity of the garment, of course. Within 15-20 minutes, probably, maybe up to an hour, if you're just really just kind of slamming it together to kind of get like a basic look. Now, if you actually want to do like a full look at it and have it fit nice and everything, it's definitely going to take a lot longer to get there, because
Yeah.
there's a lot more manipulations and everything you have to do. And then if you actually want to have the avatar walk with it, or you want to do a really fun rendering on it, then that's going to take even more time, just because there's so many much more finite details you have to put into that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, when you're trying to get those really fun, like, social media pictures for the avatar or for your brand or anything, it's actually a slightly different pattern than the one you will want to send to your factory. And
Oh,
that's
this is interesting.
specifically, yeah. So it's because, like, when you're doing a normal hem, you'll do your normal hem, you'll fold it up and you'll sew it and you'll iron it. And you can do that in Clo, but if you really want to make it look really nice and crisp, you'll actually cut it off and you'll actually put a seam in there instead. And then you'll
Okay.
sew it differently. So it kind of does, it is, you have to work with it a little bit differently to make it look really good in a 3D render than what
Mhm.
you'd actually want the pattern to be. Um,
Okay. So if
yeah,
I
so
came to
there's,
you as a brand, would you do both versions for me, or how do you most often work?
I would definitely talk to you about what you were wanting, because
Mm.
it would definitely be two different options. There's
Yeah.
like the really fast, quick, and dirty that you can just kind of look at and you can kind of see some things with it, no finesse, no real great fit or anything. Then there's like the actual pattern. Here's what it would look like. We can still get her to walk. We can still get her to do a lot of stuff. But it might not be like the perfect avatar walk. It might not be fully social media, because you
Friendly.
sometimes see those avatars walking on social media and everything, and that takes a lot of other stuff kind of in the background. A lot of times when you're doing that type of stuff, if you have a lot of pockets, all the pockets
Mm.
on those avatars are going to be fake, so that there's less fabric trying to collide with each other in the actual rendering. Whereas if you're actually doing a fitting in Clo, you want all those layers of fabric there so you can
Of
kind of
course.
see what's happening and how they're interacting with each other.
Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. For also, like, if you want to send that pattern to a factory, they need to see your seam allowance and what to
Yes.
do. But yeah, it might not look good in a rendering. But I think that for me is the most interesting part, because that also goes to show that if you want to create a pattern and speed up your production, it's much more important to find a pattern maker than it is to find a Clo 3D designer, because a Clo 3D designer will not necessarily be able to create a pattern for you.
Yeah. Uh, because it is an avatar, because it is a 2D thing creating a 3D thing, you can actually create garments that don't fit. And they'll
Yeah.
look like they fit on the avatar completely. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to fit. But when you actually go and take the measurements, or when you go and do the fit maps, it will show up that it's like, this won't actually fit a real human.
Mm. And
But
that's
it is
important for fit.
it's very important for fit. And it's one of those things that um I've seen a little bit of like, oh, look at this really cool thing. They're like, it doesn't fit, but it stays on my avatar's body. And I'm like, that's two different things, because you can just shrink it up so that it's like skin tight.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, oh, yeah, it looks really great, but will it actually fit a human? No. Well, then we need to change that.
Oh, that's what I mean. This is music to my ears because, as you know, I love fit. For me, I think the whole really design process and manufacturing process, for me, the most important thing is the fit. And I think also as a brand, that's what you sell on. And I think it's kind of similar to if you only have a design tech pack, but not the size specification, you send that to a factory, you do not know what you're getting. If you have a size specification or a pattern, like in your case, you have much more of control of what you're getting back for your first sample.
Yeah.
So music to my ears. But it's also good to know, because that means that not just any designer can say they're a 3D pattern maker, because you need the pattern making skills, and you also need the technology and that side of the skills, not just making it pretty.
Yeah.
So interesting.
It definitely goes hand in hand. And I still think everybody who plays around in Clo 3D and creates stuff for their own little visions, they can definitely get a lot out of it, but then they would need to get a real pattern. To make sure.
Yeah, I think there's no shortcut in the industry in any way when it comes to actually the manufacturing and getting factories and making the proper samples and fitting. Even if you can make really cool stuff before then, you can make nice designs, you can sketch, you can use Illustrator, you can use Clo 3D, but yeah, that's really interesting. But, so I'm like, what should we say? So what would you say is like the biggest benefits for like using Clo 3D in like your pattern making?
I love being able to, if I have a design, just being able to put in those minor tweaks for a designer and then have them relook at it. It's so, because normally when you're making a design for the first time, you have to pattern it, then you have to sew it together, and then you kind of have to put it on a dress form and look at it with your designer. So I've worked with designers where they give me the pattern, we talk, or they give me the image, we talk about style lines and fullness and all that stuff. And then I'll go and make it. And then I can send them a picture. I can send her with the avatar walking a little bit. I can send her a little video. And then we can talk, and they'll be like, oh, I actually want, like, let's twist the pockets a little bit. Can we also like manipulate the fabric direction? So one time I was working with stripes, and stripes, you can either have them go horizontal, you can have them go vertical, you can have them go chevron. And she was just like, oh, can I play with this? Can you send me a picture of them, of like these two patterns having the chevron, but then the rest of them having vertical or having horizontal. And I can quickly just change the grain of my fabric in Clo 3D, line up the chevrons and everything. And then she would be able to kind of visualize the differences between those. So, and it's
also get the different movements when you change the grain.
Yeah. Well, because it does still, as much as digital fabric can act like real fabric, there is a list in Clo 3D of different types of fabric that kind of have the same type of properties in there. So that some, if you put in like a denim or a corduroy, it'll be much more stiff and everything. Whereas if you put on like a rayon or a stretch knit, it'll definitely have different properties and different stretches. Now, it's not perfect for sure. Just like I said, you can make any fabric fit any body or any avatar, and it might not actually fit. But it still helps kind of give you those properties. And when it's walking and everything, you can still kind of see if it's going to be a heavy flow or if it'll be more of a light rayon.
Yeah. Bounce.
Bounce and lighter flow.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fascinating. That's so interesting. Can we hear a little bit more as well how you use this, not only for fashion brands like coming to you, but also like in your theater world? It's so fascinating with the theater, I think.
Yeah, it's actually a very similar process, except in theater, I don't get tech packs telling me all those details of how low they want stuff and how full they want stuff and everything. So that's where I have to have that conversation with the designer talking about those, because sometimes I get very artistic renderings. I actually have one right here. Oh, let's see if I can.
Yes. So like a proper fashion illustration only. Wow.
Yeah. So that was the rendering I got from our designer. And I had to talk with her. It's like, okay, what do you see here versus what do I see here? How do you want this to happen versus how do you want this to be patterned? And that dress actually ended up being over 100 pieces cut out. There was a lot of pieces going on in that dress. It was definitely a labor of love.
Yes.
But then it's a very similar process after talking back and forth with the designer. Then I move into the pattern making process of it. And then I will, if I'm working in the Clo, I will definitely do a little bit of fit. I'll do the rendering. I'll have the avatar walk for it. And I put it up in a Dropbox, Google Drive, so that they can take a quick look. And if there's any like minor notes or anything they want to change before they see it in fabric, then
that's great.
Yeah, I'll do those little changes and then I'll actually build it. So I will cut it out and build it. Sometimes I cut it out via our scene shop has a large plotter printer. So I can print it out just like that. And sometimes if I'm working at home, I have a projector. So then I'll just project my pattern straight onto my fabric. And that's how I actually print it out, so that I don't have to use a home printer and tape everything together, which is also an option.
Yes, that's the option I have used when I've had patterns from my factories and I had to work it out. But I love that idea of projecting it on a projector. I might steal that one from you. That was not a bad one. But yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna have a little sip.
I'll follow through.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone. It's been flu week this week. But yeah, well, I think it sounds very interesting. So, do you work in the same process? I mean, I'm amazed that your designer gives you such a lovely illustration and you can take that. I mean, I can understand it must be definitely a labor of love and so much work going into it. But when you work with smaller brands, then you require a size specification or just a design tech pack, or what you prefer, and how do you work? If I was to say I'm starting my brand and I'm contacting you, what would you want me to supply you with?
I definitely want to know the size you want to fit on originally. So we need to know the fit model. We need to have a good sets of measurements and all that. Only because it's same within theater. Like, you're making it for a very specific person. So if you first have me make the design for a small, and then you're like, oh, but actually we want to we want to test fit in large. Yes, I can grade it up to that size, but then I'm going to have to do all the changes and everything, and then I'd have to grade it again. So it's kind of one of those that if you can start in the fit size that you're hoping to fit, that's always going to be the best way to go. It's also just those informations. Like, if I'm not clear on some of your tech pack things, I definitely am always a pro of, let's talk about communication. Let's make sure this is clear. And because we want to make sure that's as clear as we can get it before it goes to the factory, before we're putting in lots and lots of money to get those samples and everything. Whereas if as long as, if we can get those like kind of minor details worked out before it goes there, that will hopefully help you save one or two fit models or mock-ups before you're actually diving into it.
Yeah, that sounds really nice. Sorry, everyone. I think that sounds great. And also I wanted to ask, with the sizing inside Clo 3D, because I mean, it is a software, so I'm guessing it has some kind of limitations. I know it's growing all the time, but it would be interesting to hear, like, if I asked for a small, can I give you my size specification and what I want with the small, or is there set standards, or how does it work within Clo?
Yeah. So Clo comes with a set of lots and lots of different avatars, actually, and you can actually download and create new avatars within there. So a lot of times when I'm starting, if I don't have too many specifications, if I just have kind of like a bust, hips, weight, and height, I can actually go in and change. I'll find the avatar that's closest in Clo and go in there and then start I will actually go and notch them up by increments. So I always find retyping into Clo or like just going for an avatar and then completely being like, hey, I'm going to retype this. It kind of goes at the same time. So if you change a 36 bust and you hit delete and then you go 38, it will actually kind of do like a weird in and out type thing, because again, it's a program. It's trying to do what you want it to do, and it doesn't always wait for the end key. So there's always those little arrows on the side that you can kind of click up or click down, and you can get really, really close because they go up in like, I want to say they go up in 1/8 inch increments, which you can get really close. But then what also helps with that is if you're clicking up and you click up too far in it, or if you keep clicking up, it'll help keep everything else on the avatar proportional to itself. So it will start help bringing out some of the other measurements, as well.
Yeah. Okay, but that's interesting. But so when you do this as well, do you see the avatar changing on your screen? So if I increase the bust, I will see it so that I can keep a vision of my customer. Like say I'm doing a certain type of garments for a certain type of body type, then I can actually see and create my body type before I even get to my patterns.
Yeah. And they definitely do have that. And right now, this past summer, they actually just did a new update where you can actually change the bust and butt size. So before you were doing a full round up and down, which if you have a large bust, having the full round is different than actually having a big bust. So they're getting better at getting those size inclusive body types and everything in there. They definitely have a wide range of sizes, and you can definitely manipulate and change those bodies and everything. Yes. But there is still, it's still growing. It's still learning. It's not perfect yet. But there's a lot that you can do.
It will take some time, but that's really, I think, like with these softwares, it's so amazing. It's like such a new world for us, but it's also, I mean, it's been around for a while, yes, but it's changing and it's adding, and it's also becoming more affordable. That was my other question, because I know you started in Optitex, and I mean, I learned a little bit of Gerber if you're German, back in the day. But I mean, Clo3D is as a designer, is very available. Can you tell me the benefits of why you're working in Clo3D and what you think is the benefits of it in comparison?
I mean, so in comparison to like the big name companies like Optitex and Gerber and everything, those do have probably a few more benefits than Clo3D. But the big downside is it is a high ticket price. So you're going to have to always be paying a lot more for it. Where Clo is definitely that low ticket entry. So being more of a freelancer and somebody who works with patterns and loves doing it digitally, it's fun that I can actually continue to do my digital patterns and still make sure I'm keeping up with the technologies and keeping up with the new industry standards and everything, just because it's that's something that's always going to be growing. It's always going to be changing. And especially with the way tech is going in our world, it's good to get in, because if you can learn one 3D program, you're always going to have an advantage if you have to go in and learn another one. They're all going to be set up differently. They're all going to have their own quirks. And I've talked to many people who have worked in a lot of different ones, and they all hate a certain one that they work with, and they all love a different one that they work with, and it's all because of those little tiny quirks within the program. Just like a lot of different things, Google Docs versus Word versus, there's
PC
always
versus Mac, right?
Exactly. So it's those little quirks. But if you can kind of get in and learn the programs or learn that stuff, it always helps to have that base knowledge. I think a lot of people, with it being a lower price to entry, can really help grow that, because Clo listens to their customers and they hear what they want, and they'll start putting that into the works so that it will continue to grow and get better and better and better.
That's so good. Yeah. I'm amazed. And what I really want to know is, how did you like get into 3D patterns? Because like when you said digitally, your face like lit up. So tell us about how you got into actually doing pattern making in 3D. Because when you think of pattern making, or at least for me, maybe like a lot of industry people, you think very much like, okay, it's changing, but very much like paper, the pattern maker who loves the crayons and their scissors and their pens and drawing on the paper. So it's very fascinating to hear.
Yeah. Well, I had to take a class in graduate school on computer-based pattern drafting in Optitex. And, the first day you get this little dongle and you learn to set up the program and you kind of start diving into it. And for whatever reason, it spoke my language, because I absolutely loved the class. It was so much fun for me. I was able to be like, oh my goodness, I can make these really crazy things. I can have it walk the pattern for me with these crazy curves. And it then actually, it tells me, it's like, yeah, you have a little bit of ease here. And I was like, that's where I want the ease, and it'll tell you how much ease. It'll tell you how long this line is versus how long this line is. And will they match up and everything? And it was just so much fun. I absolutely loved it. So luckily my professor was very nice, and she let me keep my dongle after the course so I could continue to practice in it and learn with it. While I was in grad school, I was actually able to, draft some more little half scales and actually put them together and see how it worked. Like, could I get it to really fit on my girl, like from just patterning it digitally? Which, and doing all those little alterations. And it's just so much, I don't know, I love to do those alterations. And back when I was learning it, I didn't have the best computer, so it was harder to do the 3D version. She still had the fit map. She still had an avatar and everything, and you could kind of make it fit on her and everything. But my computer would crash a lot because it couldn't quite keep up with that. So when I was doing a certain project, my professor let me borrow her computer that had a little bit better processor, but it would still crash all the time. And I was working on a pattern and I would continually always hit like the control save, but I was working at a desk where I could face both directions. And once one computer crashed, I would just flip around and move over to the other computer until the first computer would get fixed on the crashing. And I was just continually moving back and forth. And it was just like, oh, I just crashed another computer. Let's go back to the other one.
I love how it works, but I guess Close 3D doesn't do that for you.
Well, and I have a much more powerful computer now. My computer is, it has, a lot of RAM, a lot of, it has a graphics card. Like, that's the really important thing. You need a really good graphics card. You need a lot of RAM. You need the stuff for it to actually do the render and everything. So getting the better computer really helped with the crashing. It still happens. But
yeah, well, I think it happens to all of us, these technical problems. I've got two very exciting questions, but I'm going to start with the first one because it relates to what you said before and a little bit this. When you render something, say like a 3D, like, hey, this is how she walks, how would you send that to a client? Like, how could I view it?
I record it. So if she's doing like a fun little walk, and everything, there's different ways you can record it. So if I want to have it to be like a fun social media thing, I'll record it from like 5 different angles and then cut it together myself. Or you can actually have it just record it straight through, and then you are always in like the very front position. So you'll see the avatar walk in, she'll walk towards you, she'll do a fun little turn, and then she'll walk out. The other thing that you can actually do in Clo is you can actually make the camera move. So you can actually have the avatar walk on, and then as she's walking towards you, you can make the camera do like a 360 view of her as she's walking up, and then she can do her fun little thing, and then you can actually have the camera like follow her out and everything. Again, that takes a little bit more time, it takes a little bit more process, it takes a little bit more finesse to do that, but you can then save all of those different videos so that you can kind of see her. I mean, you can also just have her walk in place. So a lot of times I'll give them like a couple different angles so they can see the different angles of the walking, of the skirt, of different things.
Yeah, and I would receive that like in an MP4 or something like that, or how? Yeah, that's amazing. That's really cool. So that's really good. So we know how you also receive it back and can view it, but that's really great. So like anyone really who hires you have the ability to see what you've also created for them. So that's really super. But
yeah,
now the other question, which is kind of relative as well or related to this, is because I know you do patterns in Illustrator too, or I think it's a combination. So I would like to learn a little bit more like about that, because I know that if you're from Clo 3D, I think, right, you get more a pattern for a plotted printer. So the manufacturer needs to have some kind of software or printer to read it. So how does it work? Like for like a small brand like me, if I want, like I want to have a PDF pattern, can you do that, and how would you do it?
Yeah, so actually you can export Clo in a lot of different formats. So a lot of times I will export Clo into a PDF and then open it in Illustrator, and I'll do some final touches on there, especially if I'm providing like a homemade pattern for somebody, or if I'm doing one of my Etsy sellable patterns and everything. I don't like how Clo's grain lines and pattern markings work. I like their notches, but I don't like how their pattern labels work. It's not my favorite. So I actually will move those into Illustrator, and I'll do those myself separately. Now, if I'm actually patterning in Illustrator, which you can do, you can start with your basic sloper. You can start with just a half scale pattern. It's very similar on how you actually need to pattern it. You'll have to kind of cut up the pattern and everything. There's just a lot more steps. So in Clo 3D, I can say I want to rotate this dart, and I click, say rotate. Here's the line I want to rotate. Here's my bust point, and it'll go and it'll move it for me. And the pattern's a whole thing. When I pattern in Illustrator, if I want to rotate a dart, I still have to move the bust point, or the point of the dart up to the bust point. I have to cut the pattern apart at the bust point, and then wherever I want to move the dart to, and then I cut it, and then I can rotate that entire pattern there. And then I have what could look like a complete pattern, but it's actually cut up. It's cut at the bust point, and it's cut over at my other dart. So then I would either have to go back in and reconnect all the dots, or what I like to do is I actually retrace my pattern. So that I'll create a new layer and trace a new pattern out, so that if I ever want to then be like, oh, well, maybe I want to have this to be a 2-dart bodice, I can then, instead of having to cut another pattern, I can then just go back and recut and manipulate that pattern. So it takes a lot more time. You don't get the fun 3D aspect of it. But I've definitely drafted lots of patterns in Illustrator as well.
Yeah. So from a customer point, if I came to you and I wanted a pattern, which is like the cheapest version as well, like for you to do? Is it if I'm only interested in a flat pattern and I'm gonna make something from? Would that be Illustrator, or would that be Clo 3D?
So you also have to think about the value of your time.
Yes, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, because Illustrator, depending on I think you can get it for like $22 a month right now.
Like Friday's coming up, everyone, then it's good.
Yeah. So I think that if you're just getting Illustrator and that's nothing else, if you're getting like the full suite, then it's like $69. So if you're getting the full suite, that gets pricey. But with Clo, if you buy the year subscription, I think I calculated it out that monthly, if I buy the year subscription, it's only like $36 a month. So from 22 to 36 isn't that much money. It is because you have to do it in the big chunk and not in the monthly installments. So that's a thing. But you also, I can pattern so much faster in Illustrator, or in Clo 3D than I can in Illustrator. I have on my YouTube channel, I do have some patterns where it's like, here, I've done this pattern in Illustrator. Now let's go do it in Clo. I do some live events where I do a hand drafting example, and then we move on to the computer in Illustrator. I do the exact same pattern manipulations in Illustrator, and they can see the difference hand versus in the computer. And then I'll do it in Clo, and then and it's like insane how much faster it is. Like, you know, I'm just like, okay, now we've done this, and like 2 minutes later, I'm like, oh, and here's the pattern again, and they're like, oh
my God.
Like,
that is amazing. So, like, from an industry point of view as well, there is no questioning why this is coming in strong, because it'll save both time and money, because time is money when we're running a business, whether it's small or large. And also, like, all the possibilities around it. It sounds super, super exciting.
There is definitely the learning curve of learning the software. So you know, jumping in first, you're not gonna. It's gonna be slower than you can do it hand drafting.
Of course.
But especially if you're using a patterning software specific, you will be able to move faster. Especially if you're trying to add fullness, if you're trying to add darts or pleats, not darts, but pleats. You know, I can click 3 buttons and say I want to add 5 pleats that are this size, top and bottom, go, and it just automatically whoop, does it for me.
And then you can see how it moves with that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I love that you have your YouTube channel as well, where you have all these examples. I have watched them. I am definitely going to take some of your courses, because I think Clo 3D is it's the future, especially like since I love the pattern cutting side of it and my size specifications and my numbers. I always say I'm bad at maths, but when it comes to patterns, I'm not bad at maths, so I'm not really sure how that works. But yeah,
well, it's the fun math.
Yeah, it is, exactly. I think that's it.
And the other thing I always tell people, they're like, "Oh, I'm terrible with math. I could never be a pattern maker." I'm like, well, with digital, you actually don't need to do a lot of math. Like, it will do a lot of the math for you, because it's like, oh, okay, well, I have these lines, I want to split it into thirds. You click a button and you say, I want to split it into thirds, and it splits it into thirds. I don't even have to do the math anymore. And I love doing the math.
Yeah. So. Yeah, for patterns I do too, actually. But yeah, that's really fascinating though. But yeah, that sounds, wow, so interesting. I'm just gonna think if there's anything more, if we should go to our Q&A. But I think I know lots about this now, and I think it's super exciting. But yeah, let's see. Is there any questions out there? See if there's anyone to ask questions. I actually have a few that I've received via email for people who are going to watch the replay, so I might dig into one of those if no one is having any questions. Let's see, let's start with one of them and see what comes up. So let's see what we had here. So this is a good one, and it's maybe not just Clo 3D, but I mean it's related. What are some common challenges I might face as a startup when it comes to the pattern making, and like how to overcome them?
Yeah. So working with a freelance pattern maker, or somebody who is not necessarily directly with a manufacturer, you can sometimes get a few more conversations that are easier, because if you have a pattern maker that's more freelance, you can definitely have them, you can have a go back and forth with them, because they're much more wanting to get the fit exactly the way you want it. Where sometimes manufacturers, they want to get your stuff to the production line faster. So it's like, if you're wanting to tweak small things, or if you're wanting yet another prototype or another thing, you know, you might get a little bit of pushback or something between those. So I always find when you work with like a freelance pattern maker, they're devoted to trying to get your garment fitting as best as you want it to be. And then they can work with you from there, and they can do a few more fit models. You know, if they have a sewer here, or a pattern, or a, oh my goodness, I just lost the word. The garment maker. a stitcher.
Yeah.
If they have one
seamstress.
Yeah. Yeah, a seamstress. If they might have their own seamstress where they could actually make your mock-up here stateside or wherever you are, like if you're within close proximity. Because I worked with a stitcher that's across the country, and you just mail stuff everywhere. But then you can actually make the prototypes before you're actually even at the manufacturer. Now with that though, you still will want to make a prototype from that manufacturer so you can kind of make sure that the sewing is the way you want it to be, the pattern, everything translated.
Yes.
That's still really, really important. So it's not fully taking away that step, but there are some pros and cons to working with a freelance pattern maker than a manufacturer. Now, that's not saying that all manufacturers are going to be pushing you through the process or anything like that. There are great manufacturers out there as well that will really work with you and everything. So you got to find that relationship with those manufacturers. And I'm sure Annette has a lot of manufacturers that can help you do all that stuff as well.
And you said you took everything out of my mouth there. Like literally, that's what I say the whole time. Firstly, hey, communication and relationship with your manufacturer is super important. And don't overwhelm them either and expect like too many samples. Like I spoke to one brand who had, when they spoke to me, they were up to 30 samples. I think their manufacturer was, I nearly fainted. I've never heard anything like that. I mean, they must have had the most patient manufacturer in the whole world because, I've never heard that actually. But I mean, of course, it can happen. Even like big companies I've worked for that we have not gotten it right, and it's been a style that you think is going to really be successful. So we have pushed through with more samples. But to be honest, if you can do this process, I think it's like you say, it's great. Like if you can even just do it 3D and then talk to your manufacturer, it will help them so much, and it will help you, and it will help time. But also what you said, don't expect that your manufacturer will do a perfect sample just because you have a pattern, whether it's drafted on paper or all of these things, or you've tested it. Firstly, fabrics react differently. So unless you have exactly the same fabric, you've sent it to the manufacturer, which is not always feasible. Or just like it's human interpretations, because we are humans making the patterns and interpreting them. I was actually at a lecture the other week at the Madrid Fashion Week, which talked about AI and the future of fashion. And she was literally like, okay, now we're doing 2D, translating it to samples, 3D, and then it goes back to like a flat image, 2D, that we put on a website or somewhere. And she's like, or even like your head, you think of it in 3D, you draw it 2D, and then you make it as a sample 3D. So it's like all these processes back and forth between 2D, 3D, personal interpretations. And I think with like something like having a pattern maker either make your sample or someone like you, Clothes 3D, I think brilliant, because you can see lots of things that you have in your head, which sometimes as a designer, you have things in your head, your clients have things in your head, and how do you communicate those in between you? And the factory has something else in their head. Hence why also design take packs and patterns, size specifications are so important and need to be so clear. But I mean, at the end of the day, we have all done this, and the industry has been going on for a long time. So like, I wouldn't, like as a startup, I wouldn't start sweating, going like, oh, I need to do all of it. You don't. You can go through the process that I work through, or you can use Clothes 3D. I mean, there's so many different processes, and they're all going to be fine in the end. Breathe. But like, it does take a few samples, whether you have a pattern or not. Sorry for the rant, but like, the passion, when you're passionate about it. So that's
a good rant to have.
Thank you, Christina. Is there anyone else who has any more questions? I've got another one here through email, but I would love to give anyone live. If you have any questions, please send them in the chat. Come on. What do you want to know about Christina and Clothes 3D? I'm going to give you one more here from my list that I got. Yes. What advice would you give to a startup about how to integrate like 3D modeling. Do you think they should? And how do you think they should go about it? Do you think they should learn themselves if they're like a small designer? Hire someone out? Like, what would be the best if you were to give your personal advice? It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a lot that it depends that goes into that. So that's a really hard, because there's not a one road that's going to work for everybody. If you are the designer, you love drawing pretty pictures, you hate dealing with the pattern, you don't feel like you're confident in that, hire somebody to work with you to create your pattern and to create that 3D rendering, that so that you don't have to learn the software. You can stay in your zone of genius and you can keep doing what you do best, and you can help get somebody else who does what they do best. If you are more of like an actual pattern maker, let's go the fully other end, who also loves to do the designing part, and you're really happy with your patterns, you really want to make, you love kind of going in and doing those tweaks and doing those manipulations and everything, then I would 100% recommend learning 3D software, because then you would be able to, do those small alterations and look at the difference, like, oh, that's I want a little bit more gathering in this area, or I want a little less gathering, or I want more of a gourd skirt, and you'd be able to play and manipulate with your entire collection and everything to actually work with that. Now, if you were just doing like the pattern making and you want somebody else to kind of make it look pretty and everything, then you could if you have, these are really good patterns, I know they fit, but I want the social media amazing things. You could then hire a Clo 3D designer specifically who can make the really amazing things look good for your social medias and everything. So there's a really wide variety of what's the best way to go. And that really depends on what you want your zone of genius to be, and where you want to work and where you want to spend your money. And it's always hard when you're a small startup. Money's always tight. So everybody's like, oh, I'll just do it myself. I'll learn it myself. And you can definitely do that. But you have to think about that. If you are a one woman show and you're trying to design it, you're trying to pattern it, you're trying to make it, you're trying to create those little, so that becomes this pressure that just really will
overwhelm.
well, that can very much overwhelm you. Whereas if you can figure out a way to help relieve some of that pressure by getting somebody who knows how to do it, is definitely a good way to go. So that's kind of, I went to the very two extremes, just because.
No, but I like that. I think it's like good advice, and sort of, because it's also a little bit about your skill. If you're very technical, maybe, and you are coming from, say, a fashion design background, maybe you can learn, and maybe you do a bit of pattern cutting and you have pattern cutting books at home. But you could also be like, most of my clients do not come from the fashion industry. They have no idea of they might not even like to draw. So like they can't visualize their idea as much. So there's a lot of, you have to talk and you have to do the back and forth with the trends and with the ideas, and before you even get to design tech pack. So I think if time is money, if you run a small business, just like everything you have to do, and it's not just, this is the thing, it's not just making your lovely design real in manufacturing, it's the sale of it and the marketing. So I agree with you, like time is money, so where we can, but it's good, like think about what your interest is. If you love marketing, then maybe focus your effort on marketing and get designer help. If you love the actual design because you come from a design background, then maybe hire out the marketing instead. But I do think as a small brand, you should always be involved slightly in all of the areas until you have hit the proper brand image and your ethos and your design style. But so cool.
Because you can learn so much from audience feedback, specifically through marketing, like what's really hitting home with people and what's not.
Like customer feedback. And I mean, just like that for you, I guess, with your work within the theater, that's what you get a lot, I guess, when you have a fitting and it's like, no, I need to sing. I'm gonna have to move my arms more.
Yeah, we have a lot of those where we have a lot of tricks that we sometimes have to do so that, you know, garments are not like, we make historical garments, but they're not historically accurate because they need to, you know, do stuff that they would not do historically. So you sometimes have to do some interesting pattern making to make it work modern, but still look very historical.
Yeah, I think that's genius. But like, that goes to show that a good fit is needed in so many areas. It's not just a good fit of a dress. It's a good fit to movement. It's a good fit. So hence why also the importance of taking your 3D pattern, which then becomes a PDF flat pattern, which becomes your sample. I mean, you're still going to always have to fit that sample because the fabric will fall differently. Not only how it looks when it falls, but for the movement. Like, you don't want an armhole that's very high up in your armpit and feels uncomfortable the whole day. So that's why I think pattern cutting, product developers or garment technicians that help with the fitting, it's like so important. And on that, if there are no other questions, I'm going to let Christina tell you a little bit more about where you can find her. But let's see, any more questions? No, everyone's quiet today. There's quite a few viewers, but no questions. Okay, well, Christina, tell us where everyone can find you. And I know you have some cool stuff coming up as well, I think.
Yeah. So you can find me. I'm on most socials. I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. Right now, I do have a weekly video that comes out on YouTube as well. And then this coming month on I should have that date memorized, shouldn't I? But it is on October 14th and 15th. I'm actually doing a live event so that you can actually see some digital patterning in action. So like I said, I'll do the hand drafting, then we'll do it in Illustrator and do it in Clo. And then we'll actually do a full live drafting. We'll take a picture, we'll do some design analysis on it, and actually then draft it. We'll draft it in Clo. We'll see it move around, and we'll talk about other ways that you can then use digital patterning in your life and everything. So it's a really fun day. It is 2 hours each day, so it is a 4-hour event. It is completely free. It's just one way I find people can just kind of get into digital pattern drafting, because I have a lot of people that are always so interested in it. But before you truly dive into it, you want to be able to kind of see what it can do, and all that stuff. So I love bringing people in. I love showing people how cool of a system it is, and trying to get people inspired. So you can find that link through my Instagram. I also have it on my Facebook. It'll just be join the next live event, and it should take you right to that page, and you can sign up to join. I always have a good time with it. So it's just a lot of fun.
Give us your handle. What's your Instagram handle? Creative HadleyDike or
Creative HadleyDike? Yes.
Perfect. Same on YouTube.
Yes, I believe it's pattern making with Creative HadleyDike on YouTube. But
okay, perfect.
Yes,
that's so good. I just want to say, I'm gonna come, and I will say to anyone listening, especially, you might think, oh, I'm not going to do a 3D pattern. I want to start a brand. I don't want to be a pattern maker. I would say join anyway, because the most important thing, I think, is to understand all the aspects, even when you hire it out, or even if you're going from size specification straight to your factory. Yes, but it's good to understand, like, what is it all about? What is the process? And if I need this later on in my business, I know what it is, and I know how I can do it, or how a person that I'm hiring can do it for me. So I think it's super important. So you should all join Christina. I will. Yeah.
It might be a little late your time, but
yeah, it's okay. It's okay. You're up early for us today, so I will join you. But yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to all of us and answering questions and everything. And look, I agree. We get in And I love that. Thank you, Christina. We also have in the chat, look, everyone is so happy. And I'm so happy to have had you here talking about this. And I am looking forward to working with you more. So,
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Great. And yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I've got another exciting interview scheduled very soon with Shefali from Amma Designs, who I know was here before at least. And it's coming, I believe it's the 10th of October. Don't quote me on it, but it's very soon. So keep your eye on that one as well. And thank you, Christina, again. And thank you for everything. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And if you need a pattern maker, Christina can close 3D for you.
Yes.
Oh, hold on. Wait. Before we go, I'm just going to write your handle because I think.
Oh, yes. I should have done that. Yes, it is. It is a odd one, but it's yeah. The last name, it always pops. So I was like, I got to use it.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
Yep.
Well, yes. Yes. You got it right, Trisha.
Yep.
Good. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you soon. And yeah, join Christina on the 15th.
Bye.
Bye.